My name is Amy Lerman, and I am community outreach. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I am proud to welcome you tonight to our webinar on behalf of the Parish School. We are so very excited to have occupational therapist Jennifer Woody as our guest speaker tonight. For the next 30 seconds to a minute, we're going to let you guys get settled. It takes a minute for everybody to get their screens just the way they want them. I hope you either have a drink or something comfortable on. And give attention to the bottom of your screen. You should see in the menu bar a spot for question and answer. Feel free to put in any question that you may have for Jennifer this evening. We're going to take 15 minutes at the end of the program for Jennifer to answer all of your questions, or as many as she can get through. If somebody else happens to ask a question that you really like, you can go ahead and upvote. And the ones that get the most upvotes, of course, will go to the top. So once again, we are so excited to have Jennifer Woody with us tonight. She is a registered and licensed occupational therapist at the Caruth Center at the Parish School campus in Houston. She has worked extensively with children who have communication delays, neuromuscular conditions, and autism, and gained additional training and experience with children who have had feeding and eating challenges. Her specialized training is in sensory processing problems in young children, developmental coordination disorder, and handwriting difficulties. She has made her a well-rounded and sought-after clinician for children with a variety of delays and difficulties. Tonight, Jennifer will discuss picky eating, ways to support your child at home, and provide needed clarification for what is typical for young children. She will also spend time at the end, as I already said, answering a few of your questions. Welcome, Jennifer. We're so happy you're here.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Amy, for that. I really, really appreciate that. I'd like to also add to that I am a mother of 4 grown children. My husband and I are empty nesters now, and we, like many empty nesters, have really embraced raising and rearing our 4-legged animals. And so I am a person who just absolutely loves animals, especially dogs. So you might see something pertaining to that in this presentation today. So, I guess I also want to let you guys know that I have, my experience goes back 20 years. And my experience, I'm lucky enough to have started back in early childhood intervention back in 2000. And from there, I worked in a neonatal intensive care unit. So feeding and eating has always been a part of my job description. And I tell you what, I've learned the most from you guys, from parents. I've learned the most from kids, and I've learned a great deal from collaborative, interprofessional work with my wonderful colleagues. So I just would like to throw that out there. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right. All right. I don't know if you've seen this one yet. I absolutely love it. This is a great analogy, right? It's a great analogy for all of us, because the troubles that we experience, the issues that we have, depends a lot on who we are and how we're made. Now you might be thinking I'm talking about little kids when I show this slide, and I am. Every child is different. Their needs are different. But I'm also thinking about you parents, and I want you to be compassionate with yourself. Please be compassionate with yourself. This is not an easy thing, and I think oftentimes we beat ourselves up for the mistakes that we've made in parenting, and we have to remember that we also do wonderful things for our kids. We've made lots of great, wonderful decisions as well, and that when we know different, we do different. So I think that's a great place to start. So let's see, here we go. So the meat and potatoes of feeding and eating. So we are just really scratching the surface today. We have such a short period of time to even begin to talk about this. But I want you to know that we're talking about the fundamentals, and these fundamentals are definitely make sense for all our parents and caregivers of preschoolers anywhere from the age of 2 to 6. It's evidence-based, and this is best practices. Now, that doesn't mean that you might not have heard of other feeding and eating practices, perhaps by your therapist or somebody that you know. There's a wide range of types of ways to deal with feeding difficulties in early childhood. But again, this is my preference. This is a good first place to start as a therapist, as somebody who works with children, and it's great for all kids, really. It's the first great place to start. So eating and feeding, two different things, but awfully interrelated, right? So obviously feeding is when we provide food for somebody else or to ourselves, right? That's a skill. And the other skills is eating. So the actual consuming of food, the actual partaking and ingesting of the food. So they're different, right? But they're definitely interrelated. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to minimize myself. So the purpose today, gosh, is just to give you honestly the biggest picture I can to help you recognize what typical feeding looks like, to discuss briefly the kinds and quantities of foods children should be served and how often. We're going to describe those strategies because that's what you're here for. You want to know, what can I do to help my child? And then we're going to talk briefly about the red flags for kids with feeding issues. I hope this is informative and enjoyable for you. And like I said, I'm just thrilled to be here with you guys tonight. Okay, so the how much, the how, and what kinds, right? And I've changed the slide over the years, you guys, and here's why. Because oftentimes you throw up there, oh, a kid needs this much grains and fruits and vegetables and meats. And then I have parents look at that and they go, no way. There's absolutely no way my kid's going to eat that. And then I started thinking, really what we need to be thinking about is, what should I serve my child? Because that's what we're really talking about, serving your child. How many servings should you give your child? So a good rule of thumb is 1 tablespoon per year of age of each food group. Now, when I say that, hopefully you can have a little bit of a sigh of relief, but then also I want you to think that all that doesn't have to be piled on the plate at one time, right? We're really going to be thinking in terms of ranges. We're going to be thinking in terms of providing the food, having that food available at the meal times for your child. A review of the food groups. We want whole grains. We want, the pastas, the whole grain breads, all those wonderful grains, the barleys, the oatmeal, fruits and vegetables. Now, I put this in one group, and here's why. Kids are more likely to eat fruits and vegetables. We know that. But if your child is eating fruits, then we're not going to get too hung up on whether or not they're partaking a lot of vegetables. You're going to serve vegetables. You're absolutely going to serve vegetables, but we're not going to worry about if they're eating a quarter cup of vegetables every day or half a cup of vegetables every day. We're going to think about the proteins, and that can mean anything from meat and eggs, beans. I highly encourage beans if you haven't done that with your child yet. They're nice and soft and easy to chew. Tofu, we can do dairy, cheeses, milk, and other non-dairy foods. And of course, it's important, when do we provide these foods? And that's one thing I don't have a lot of leeway on, right? We need at least 3 good meals a day, preferably sitting at the table, and 2 to 3 snacks, non-negotiable, a day, spaced out every 2.5 to 3 hours. And we want to make them good tasting, and we want to make them good, nutritious foods. Now, does that mean we're not going to, grab a bag of this or that every now and again? Of course not. I'm a realist. I understand how difficult it is. But we want these foods to be good tasting. And then oftentimes we have with kiddos, right? We think that they need bland. Bland is not always good tasting. You'll be surprised at what flavors your child, ages 2 through 6, is capable of handling. Let them explore these tastes and flavors. This is really important. Young children are still learning to use their mouths. They're still learning to chew, to understand the proprioceptive properties of food. So we need to be really cautious about choking hazards at this age. And those hazards can be anything from carrots that are cut the wrong way or too big. Nuts can be very problematic. Grapes, we know that's a big one. So be sure that you're really familiar with those choking hazards that can, really be a danger to our young children. Tortilla chips can be another one. The other thing I want to bring your attention to is allergies. That's a really big issue these days, and I'm fortunate to report that physicians are doing better about helping parents understand the need to expose children to those allergy foods a little bit earlier, especially if there's not a history of allergies in the family. So we need to be kind of on guard and looking for that. So allergies are often very common in children with eczema, with who have very, very naughty, bad diaper rashes that are just red and inflamed. Sometimes you'll have kids with just super red cheeks. You might have a child who's, after he's eaten something, all of a sudden his nose starts to run, or he develops a little allergy around the mouth. These are things to look for and to discuss with your pediatrician. Again, parents oftentimes, what I hear oftentimes is, oh my gosh, he used to be such a good eater. He was a great eater when he was a little guy, and now he doesn't eat anything. Now that he's up and he's running around, he's toddling around, he doesn't eat anything. Well, you might be surprised to know that actually babies, as they're growing, need just a bit more calories than your toddler may even need. And that's because there's so much growth that occurs in that first year. Toddlers aren't growing quite as fast as these babies are. So in general, we're looking for calories anywhere between the range of 1,000 and 1,600 calories, and it all depends on your child's age, their activity level. It depends on how tall they are, how short they are. These are very important considerations. So you can now hopefully see why it's often hard to say your kid needs exactly this much every single day. There are definitely great guidelines, but I have yet to meet a child who does that perfectly every day. There's just absolutely no perfect diet. There's no perfect way of eating, especially when it comes to children this age. Okay, let's see. So what's normal eating look like with young kids, especially this age? What does it look like? And I think we have our expectations of what it should be, right? And that's that kid just chowing down at every meal, clearing their plate. That's not the case. So kiddos this age, mealtimes are erratic. Their eating is erratic, and that can look different from one meal to the next, or even day to day. It can be very, very different. Looking back, I can tell you that of the 4 children I have, my youngest was a very erratic eater. He, I just felt like I was fortunate if I got one meal a day in him. I mean, he just lived on nothing. I always would talk to my husband and say, gosh, I wish I could go on the James Woody diet because he eats nothing. But it's crazy how kids can survive on so little. And it's not just survive on so little, it's just thrive on so little. They're messy. I want you to expect the mess. Expect the mess. This is part of learning. This is part of growing. Kids are messy. They're learning to use their spoons and forks. They may even be learning to use a knife. They are learning to use a cup. They're learning what food feels like. And so a lot of times you're going to get food all over the face, right? And all over the tray and on the floor. This is part of it. This is how they learn. So expect and embrace the messiness. It's part of how they learn. Fussy. I like using the word fussy instead of picky. I think they use the word fussy in the UK. Kids are young children, especially around 2 years of age. They're biologically wired. They're for sweet taste and what's familiar. It's part of their makeup, and we think that that's because that they're pre-programmed to be neophobes, and what that means is afraid of something new. So neo meaning new, phobic meaning fear of new things. So it's very common in this 2-year age range, 2 to 3 year age range. And so all of a sudden, things that they ate when they were, just starting out with these solid foods, all of a sudden they're saying, I don't want this, or they're throwing food, or they're all of a sudden not touching it. And it gets parents worried. But then again, we're looking at it, right? They're not eating as much as they did when they were infants. And now they're going through a very normal stage of food neophobia. And I think it's a protective, perhaps a layover of the, our hunter-gatherer times, where if the kid toddled off and he grabbed he wouldn't pick up food or grab things that he didn't feel safe about. And so this is very familiar. And our job as parents is to help them get through this. They have a limited attention. We expect the younger preschoolers to have a hard time sitting for, more than 10 minutes. Older children can sit for up to 15, 20 minutes. We really, we don't want to keep a mealtime going for a very lengthy period of time, but that's a decent range. So we know that little guys have some limited attention, and that's definitely to be expected at this age. They may have to poo. I don't know about you. Have you ever had a kid that as soon as you sit down and they take a few bites and all of a sudden they go, oh, I have to go to the bathroom? It's normal. It's called it's a reflex. It's called a gastrolic reflex, and it's very common. So if you have a kid that has to poo, just let them go. Come back. Don't make a big deal about it. It's just going to be part for the course for a while. Uh-oh. Here we go. Okay, so there's 3 big picture, big theme ideas I want to share with you today. And I know you're going to look at me like I'm crazy. I hope you don't, but I really want you to just take this in, think about it, and we'll expand on that in a bit. So the first one is eating is learned. Most of us think, you sit down and you eat. I mean, how hard is this? But you think about it. I mean, like everything else in life, we learn through experience, and then experience promotes our learning. They build on each other, right? So eating is learned. It's just not, it's something that we have to engage in order to get better at it. And then just obviously like eating, feeding is learned. So feeding ourselves, feeding others, that's also a learned behavior. And of course, where do we learn these from? Oftentimes it's just our parents, right? And it depends on how well you were fed as a child and some of the issues perhaps that you dealt with as a child. I know for me, I was, looking back, I lived a short time with my grandparents, and they had a garden, and I have very strong memories about food and meal times with them, and most of them very, very positive, and perhaps that's the same for you. Even to this day. But one of my most concentrated memory is one around green beans. And I was a good eater. I was really one of those adventurous eaters. But I remember being told that I needed to finish my plate of green beans. Well, let me tell you, of all the vegetables, my least favorite vegetable to this day is green beans. And it was a horrible experience, and I lived through it. I, gobbled down the green cold beans. But I don't like green beans to this day. It makes me wonder if that really had anything to do with that. Okay, so there's many, many factors that influence the ability and the desire to eat. And that's a real focus here. Many factors that influence the ability and desire to eat. It's very complex. And so when we talk about that, we oftentimes think about eating as a psycho-social, cultural process, for lack of a better word. That means that all of those domains impact our ability to eat. I mean, you think about it, when you're really, really upset, let's say you're exceedingly upset and you're about to cry, your throat tightens up, you get a knot in your throat, you know, how likely are you to eat? Probably not very. When you're out with, well, I know at our work, gosh, 11:30, lunchtime. Lunchtime is 11:30, so a lot of social cues about eating. Everybody else is at the table eating, so there I go. I'm going to start my lunch as well. Environmental factors. You know, how do I eat at a fancy restaurant versus a picnic? So these are some things to consider. Our family values, our cultural values. You know, what's mealtime look like at my house versus your house? What are my cultural norms around eating and feeding? And that can definitely look very different from one family to another. And then lastly, psychological. How does the child, him or herself, feel about their eating? And I think sometimes we really fail to look at that. And it's so often we think that kids don't eat and they just drive us crazy because they're not eating. And it's so easy to get down on them because they're not eating what we think they should be eating. And we have to be real careful about, you know, maintaining their self-esteem, because it's not fun. It's not fun. It's not good to feel like I'm failing at something. And let me tell you, a lot of these kids, they understand they're failing at the food thing, especially our older children. Okay, so two big things to think about. Dividing the responsibility. And I know this is the one where you're going to go, what are you talking about, Jennifer? Please. So the division of responsibility. Now this is the thematic framework of a very wonderful, compassionate, long history of just a fabulous dietitian and now PhD. Her name is Ellen Satter, and she published her first book back in the 1980s, and she had a revision in the 20s, and she's just a guru in the feeding and eating world. She's really the first one that kind of came up with this idea of the division of responsibility when it comes to feeding and eating. So I'm going to talk you through that. So you have a job and your child has a job. Whoops, what did I touch? Okay, it's your job. Your job as the parent to decide what foods are served, the time and the place they are eaten. It's your job. So you get to decide, what the meal is. You get to decide what time we're going to eat. And if we're going to do a picnic today, we're going to eat in the living room, or we're going to eat, in the bathtub. It's your job to decide that. And it's your child's job, the big one here, to decide which of the foods to eat from what you have served. That means they can't go, oh no, I don't think I'll have any of that. I want what's in the fridge or in the cupboard. And how much to eat, and maybe even whether or not to eat. That's a really huge, huge concept to think about. And I know I've got people here who are going, there's no way. If I didn't cajole my child, if I didn't, do a first then or really get on their case every night about eating, he would not eat. He just absolutely would not eat. I'm hearing you. I hear you. And I've heard that from lots and lots of parents. Just trust me here, okay? Because this is really, really important. And, honestly, this relates a lot to parenting. And in fact, Ellen talks a lot about how feeding is parenting. And the type of parenting that has, the most consistent research behind and positive outcomes is the parenting that says, I'm the authority here, and I have some boundaries, and it's my job to help you learn to do things, but then I also have a lot of compassion and understanding of where you are. So that's something to really dive into and think about at a later time. Okay. Oh gosh, you guys, I can't believe this. Here I am, the OT, talking about the factors that influence the ability and desire to eat, and guess what I forget? Sensory. I can't believe it. Sensory. Food is one of the most sensory rich experiences that we all engage in, right? Sensory from first smelling food when it comes out of the oven, to looking at food on the table and anticipating what it might taste like, to touching the food, to feeling it with our hands, but also to touching and feeling it in our mouth, right? So it's huge factor in how we understand food. And we're all different. You know, that's what makes some of us love Brussels sprouts and other of us, you know, just gristle at the sight of cooked meat, or at the, you know, we just absolutely love pudding or ice cream or whatever. A part of that has to do with our sensory system, how foods sound in our mouth, crunch, 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 how foods look, what they feel like on our tongue. I mean, these are huge, huge factors that influence our ability and desire to eat. So I can't believe I forgot that. Medical issues. So if I have a tummy ache, I mean, have you ever done this? He's not eating. I'm going to make him eat 3 more bites. And he says, I don't feel good. And you're like, no, you need to eat your dinner. And then guess what? An hour later, he's got a fever and he's throwing up. And then you feel terrible. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy to understand those medical issues when they arise. Medical issues can be anything from, you know, like I said, a food allergy. It can be chronic constipation. Constipation's a huge one for our little guys. It can be, you know, it can be motoric issues, delays that make it hard for us to eat. So that's a really, really big one to think about. So medical issues, low tone's a big one. So kids that have low tone, they often have a lot of reflux. They have reflux in their throat, and it hurts to eat. So you can imagine why eating might be difficult for them. So it's always important to consider all of those factors that influence eating. Okay, so sorry about that, getting ahead of myself. And then, you know, I think too, you know, I think what this also speaks to is the fact that, you know, we're also learning how new foods taste. We are trying to satisfy hunger, yes, but then we're also trying to understand our body's cues, And I don't know about you, but how frequently have you gone, I'm stressed, you know, maybe you don't recognize it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that big old bag of potato chips. I'm not hungry, I'm stressed, right? And dig in. This is what we need to help our children do, is to identify what hunger feels like, identify what anxiety feels like, or fear or sadness, so that kids don't grow up learning to tamp those feelings down with food. We want to make sure that kids use food for the reasons that they're intended, and that's to enjoy them, that's to satisfy hunger, and it's to learn about foods that make our bodies feel good. Okay, so now here we go. What to do. Wow. Okay, OT, we got to talk about appropriate seating. So what I want all you guys to do, and I'm going to try to do it here for you, is I want you to sit back on your tailbone, sit way back, and you're going to slouch over. You're going to be like a C, right? You're going to slouch over, and you're going to lift up your chin. So I'm like a little turtle, and I'm going to try to swallow. It's really hard. It's extremely hard. So what we want is good Appropriate seating. Our kids are sitting nice and tall, that they've got good stability all around them. Part of that stability is having their feet firm on a surface. So oftentimes when I talk to parents, they might have their child up on the at the island that are so popular these days, and maybe the island chair is a counter height, and their feet are dangling, and they have no support, and then they wonder why their child can't eat. It's because they don't want to fall over. It's because they don't want to fall over. So if you provide nice postural stability, so will allow them to better use their hands. So they're not thinking about, am I going to fall over? And they're not going to tell you this. No child will tell you this, but this is absolutely the case. Okay, so what you want again is that table height between the navel and somewhere in the breastbone, that they're nice and, they're comfortable reaching that tray or the tabletop. You can use an old shoebox, wrap it around, and stick it at the bottom of the chair if you need to, on the rest if you need to, and then sometimes we'll use like shelf liner on the bottom of the seat and on where the feet go. And that'll be a really good way to help them from kind of sliding all the time. Okay, yeah. So big one, don't focus on the kid. Don't focus on the kid. Don't focus on the kid eating it. Don't coerce, don't bribe, don't encourage, certainly don't force. And if you've done it before, kids are resilient. Don't worry about it. Focus on the food. Don't make a big deal when your kid takes a bite of a new food either. It's just food. It's there on your plate. And yeah, I know you're going to hear your kids say, I don't want that. I don't like that. So come up with some things to say, right? You can say something along the lines of, carrots are on the plate tonight. And then let it go. Carrots are on the plate tonight. You're going to get pushback, expect it. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. You're going to start with the flavors, the textures, and foods that they do like, right? And you're going to make it small, just tiny, 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 tiny pieces at first. Tiny changes. But you're always going to keep at least one preferred food on their plate. And then you might have a rule. You might say, we're going to have 2 servings of this preferred food, and then leave it at that. And I know you're back there. Everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, not my kid, not my kid. You don't know my kid. He's not going to eat. It's going to be horrible. He's going to starve. I hear you. I hear you. Just hear me out, okay? Okay. Keep losing my. Okay, losing my little arrow. So you're going to provide a wet washcloth for a child to clean their own face and hands. So something as simple as just a plain wet rag. And so a lot of our kids don't like their hands to be dirty. So this is going to give them the immediate opportunity to wipe their hands or wipe their face. You could also provide a dry one next to them if you want to. They can also use that to take food out of their mouth and spit it out if they need to. And we're going to teach them what's appropriate. For new foods, it may be okay, as I'm learning about a new food, if I'm not quite ready to swallow it, to spit it out gently in my napkin. That's okay. You could provide a cup too, perhaps. That's how we learn. Little guys learn anyway. The big one. Eat with your kid. So kiddos, we have what's called mirror neurons, and mirror neurons mean that kids like to imitate what we do. They learn from watching us. So one of the worst things you can do is sit your kid up on that counter stool and then walk away. Give them a plate of food and walk away. They learn by watching you. They learn that food is safe by watching you. They learn that how I can positively interact with food by watching you. They learn the routine of meal times by watching you. It's very, very important that you do this. I also think it's important, if you're able to serve family style meals. Who does that anymore, right? I don't know about you. We pretty much serve from the from the stovetop. But what you'll do is just like in yesteryear, hopefully put everything in a bowl or a platter. You're going to leave it on the table, and then you're going to practice scooping up food for your child and passing it to the next person. And it's time consuming. I understand that. It's a time consuming task. But meal times are very, very important. It's a time for us to slow down. It's a time for us to interact with one another. It's going to be how your child learns to tolerate those food smells, to tolerate being able to see that food there, and to be able to tolerate it on their plate, even if they're not able to look at it quite yet. Very important. We want to make meal times relaxing and joyful and fun. We're going to set the tone. Because remember, we talked about learning. How do we learn best? We learn best when we feel safe. We learn best when it's fun. We learn best when there's trust, right? We learn best when we can go at our own pace, when nobody's prodding us along or forcing us along. And this is with anything. It's not just with feeding. It's with anything. We learn best when there's joy. There's joy in this environment. And so that's going to be super, super important. So how do you make meal times relaxing? Well, first of all, like I said, you're setting the tone. You're not talking about eat your food, eat for your food. And in fact, if you'll do this, I'd say give it 4 weeks. Do it for 4 weeks. You're not talking about kids eating the food. You're not talking about taking more bites. You're just enjoying your food, and your child is watching you eat your wonderful meal. And you're talking about your wonderful meal. You're talking about, wow, I love how you made, talk to your wife, I love how you made broccoli tonight. It's really crunchy. And I love when I can dip it in my cheese sauce, or whatever the case may be. Talk about what you're doing with your food, how much you're enjoying it. And it feels weird at first. It'll feel odd at first. But if you do it, that's going to help you focus on the food and not on your child. And that's also going to help. They're going to learn. They're going to start thinking about what you're doing. I was with my grandson a couple of weeks ago, and I was eating lunch with him. And I was happened to be eating a spinach salad and just crunching on my spinach salad. And he reached over and took some off my plate. He put it in his mouth. He took a few bites and he spit it out. Pretty much what I expected. That's not a bad thing. He's learning. He didn't eat it. He didn't swallow it, but he's learning about that food. He's learning about that food. And so remember, for kiddos that are learning about foods, it's going to take 20 to 30 exposures before they begin to eat that food. Now, they may eat a little bit and put it back. They may put it in their mouth and spit it out. They may just begin to play with it. But 20 to 30 times is pretty much what's kind of to be expected. Okay, so some more baby steps with feeding and eating. Let's see how much time we have here. I want you to be cautious with brand name bags of food and squeezable pouches. Every OT, every speech, every dietitian I know, we are not fans of squeezable pouches. And I get it. I certainly understand the convenience of them. And I'm not saying never. I'm saying just being very cautious about them. And why? It's because, yes, you can get broccoli and prunes and squash all mixed up together, and they've got all those wonderful nutritional components in there. But when I just do this, I'm not working anything at all on my mouth except for sucking and swallowing food. I'm not working on the vision component of food. I'm not working on using my spoon. I'm not working on, really even, anticipating what that taste might be like based on the visual aspect of it. So it takes away all those important things that kids need to learn about food. And the name brand bags of food. We have lots of food nowadays that comes in little packages and name brands. A lot of our kids, especially those on the autism spectrum disorder, they can get very attached to those name name brands of food. They get stuck with, this is the only cracker I eat, or this is how it has to be served. And so if we're careful about switching those out and routinely rotating them, they're less likely to get stuck on those types of foods. But I get it. We get stuck on, parents get stuck on this. And we get stuck on this because we're afraid. We're afraid. We're afraid that our kid is not going to eat. Do me a favor and just give your child 4 weeks and see what happens. Now, I hear you. There are some kids, there are absolutely some kids out there who will not eat if they don't have their absolute favorite food. But you remember, you're still offering that favorite food, at least one preferred food at every meal and every snack. And there are kids that have more challenging problems than I'm suggesting here. But this is, again, a great first place to start. Okay. So it's real important to not let your child see you worry. Don't, please be careful about that. They're watching, they're listening. Be careful about talking to your friends about your child's picky eater. Don't ever say, he won't eat that, he's so picky. Because guess what? Kids live up to our expectations. What you want to do is say, you know, we're learning about this food. How can we're learning about this food together. How can we learn about this food? Very, very important to be careful about how you talk about your child's eating, and then also how you talk about food. We're so quick to say, that's junk food, that's unhealthy, this is good food, this is growing food, this is, you know, that's bad for you. When kids are stuck eating foods that may be less nutritionally dense, especially your older preschoolers, they know that. They know that. There's a part of them that begins to know that, and it's because you told them that for a long time. And we don't want that to translate into them feeling bad about themselves. So, you know, we're going to be really careful about what we say about food. It's all food. It's all food. Now, but remember, you're the gatekeeper, right? You're the person that talks about, you're the person that has the key to the lock of the foods that you're offering, that you're allowing into the house, and that you're providing for your meal times. Your kid is not in charge of that. You are. Now, that doesn't mean you're not talking about their preferences and you're not understanding what their preferences are, because you absolutely want to do that. Okay. You want to make sure that you're providing routine opportunities to let your child help you cook and shop with you. Now, of course, in this time of COVID, that's not happening so much with the shopping, but definitely cooking. Kids as young as 2 can help you cook. They can help you pour. They can help you stir. These are great ways that develop the sensory system. Honestly, and fine motor system. It helps us normalize our responses to new smells and textures and sights. This is very, very important. And along with that, you're going to engage in some food play outside of meal times, and perhaps even at the end of a meal if they haven't touched it. So what that does, playing with food outside of meal times, and so it can be something as simple as playing in colored spaghetti, or being a food scientist and cutting up food, or cutting up a pineapple and trying to figure out what's inside. Or we've all done this, right? You take the bottom off of a celery and you stick it in water, colored water, and you watch the celery turn from green to blue. Be creative in your ways to play with food. And then I want to say too, so perhaps your child hasn't even looked at those peas that you put on her plate. Pretty common, right? So maybe before you clear the dishes away, you play with the food a little bit. Now, there's going to be a time and a place, and I get that. We're worried about manners, but for little guys, manners are a ways to come. But you can do anything from like stabbing them, learning to stab them with a fork, and taking them off and putting them in a cup. Or you can even smash them with your finger. You could, and talk about what it feels like. What does it feel like when I smash it with my finger? How I feel it go pop. Your child can feed you. Your child can pick up the peas and put them in the mashed potatoes and stir them up. Another thing you can do is, honestly, when they're getting ready to clean up their plate, have them take that food and put it in the garbage. So if they're interacting with food, they're more likely to eat it. Now, there's a range there, though. So some of our kids have a really hard time with even looking at new foods, and those kids are going to need some extra help. Some kids have a hard time of touching foods. You might have to step back, go slow, go very, very slow with these suggestions. You want to be sure to rotate foods again and again. So keep providing those foods. He didn't eat it this time. And it feels like you're being wasteful. You're not being wasteful. He's learning. He's rehearsing the potential of him eating that food. Now, you may need to serve tiny, tiny portions of a new food at first. And you can do that by mixing it, putting it next to a familiar food. You can do that by just putting a tiny little piece on their plate, and then you're eating bigger portions of that food. It's okay to start small. In fact, that's what I really recommend. Start super, super small. Patience and consistency. These are the keys. This is the key to getting kids to eat. And it sounds counterintuitive. I hear you. What you're saying is, how will he ever like it if he never tries it? How will he ever like it if he never tries it? But what we're, again, working at doing is not just providing a solution to hunger, but then also helping children learn how to nourish themselves, how food tastes. And if you're eating hamburgers every night, or if you're eating chicken nuggets every night, I get it. I understand the fear. I understand where you're coming from, and it's a good place. But if you're doing that, what they're learning to eat is that food. They're not learning to eat any other foods. So what you got to do is keep going. You never give up. Do not give up. You keep providing the food. You keep providing the food. And so, again, if you have something that's familiar, so say your kid likes apple slices cut up really small and the skin cut off, great. That's a great place to start. Then maybe you can move to pears, because pears are very similar food to an apple. If your child likes mandarin oranges, that's a great place to start. Then you're going to move to something like a different type of orange. Again, very small, tiny steps along the way. Okay. So when is a feeding specialist needed? So feeding specialists have been around, I would say, for about 30 years now. It's a growing profession. Feeding specialists can be an OT, it can be a psychologist, a dietitian, and obviously a speech and language pathologist. Sometimes feeding specialists work alone, but oftentimes they work in a group at a big hospital. And then the reason for that is because, right, feeding issues have multiple reasons of occurring, and it's usually not just one. So it's a very, very good idea to seek the help of a feeding team whenever possible. And there are issues, obviously, that an individual feeding therapist can help with. So if your child has sensory issues, you can definitely speak with an occupational therapist. But so it really depends on your feeding therapist's their experience and kind of the issues that your child is having. So when do you see a feeding therapist? Of course, with poor or too much weight gain, and your pediatrician is going to recommend this, and you're going to really be very diligent about letting them know what the problems are, about how much and what kinds of foods your child is eating, and you'll be very specific about that so you can get the help that you need. Choking, gagging, coughing, a lot of food refusals. Of course, choking, we've all choked, I guess, to some degree, right? We get food or water in our airway. True choking, right? Those when you're turning blue and you've got the hand on your throat. And if you've never given a child a Heimlich maneuver, I hope you don't ever have to, but I have had to do that before. It's the scariest thing in the world. So choking is obviously a real concern. Kids gag though when they're learning to eat, and a certain amount of gagging is normal. When gagging is persistent, when gagging is often paired with a very fearful response, this can be problematic. Coughing, a lot of persistent food refusals, and coughing, these are definitely big red flags when a child is eating. Excessive crying, meltdowns when new foods are presented. You're going to have crying with little kiddos. You're going to have the fussiness. It's part of it. But when it's excessive, when it doesn't get better as new foods are being presented, that's a problem. So excessive crying, complete meltdowns, fear, and you're kind of freaking out. That might be a chance. It might be a flag that it's time to see a feeding specialist. Now, again, oftentimes what you see when things change, when you get kind of really set your boundaries, you may see worse behavior. You will see worse behavior before it gets better, so expect that. A child who avoids certain food groups or textures, this can be something to think about. I don't get worried when parents tell me my kid doesn't eat vegetables. It's not enough. Kids can grow and thrive without eating vegetables. Do we want them to eat vegetables? Yes, we do. But think about it. How are you preparing vegetables? Vegetables are bitter. Kids are going to avoid vegetables initially. It's part of their makeup. It's part of how they're wired. And it's our job to help them learn. And you do that providing vegetables that smell and taste good. But that's going to take some time. So don't worry about that. I had one parent tell me one time, and I don't know, maybe you are out there, parent. My husband only ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from 6 to age 15. And he might have. And you know what? Guess what? He's survived as an adult. He's doing fine. He's, perhaps he's not the world's best eater now, but he likes food and he can eat a wide variety of food now. So those can definitely be, scenarios for some of our kiddos. And it's really up to you to decide, is this something worth pursuing? Okay, so my child always eats something different from his or her family. And a good rule of thumb is to step away from that kids menu whenever you can. When you go out to eat, try to make your child's meal look like your meal. Now, that doesn't mean you're not ever going to serve chicken nuggets and French fries. It does not mean that. But it does mean that if we are always serving something different to our child than what we're eating, then we're not teaching our child to learn to eat. So it's really important that we look at that. And again, we're not talking about changing things overnight. We're not talking about, pulling the tablecloth off the table and saying, oh, we're starting from scratch. We're not doing that. We're starting where that child is. But when your child always eats this different set of foods, this is going to be an issue that you could definitely get some support from a feeding specialist. Food quantities that are restricted. When they eat less than 20 foods by age 2, it can be a problem. Now, you want to be really careful about that, because oftentimes we'll hear parents say, oh, he only eats chicken, but then he eats chicken like 5 different ways. Or he only eats crackers, but then he eats 6 different crackers. Or, he only eats meat, or he only eats fruit, but then you find out that he really eats fruit prepared a variety of ways. So you got to be counting those variety of ways food is served, as well as the range of food. So that's going to be important to know. Difficult food transitions. Kids that have difficulty transitioning from bottles to cups to table foods, from baby foods to table foods. When you're stuck, you need some help.
Jennifer?
Yes.
This is so amazing.
Are you done? Are we done?
And I don't want to interrupt a moment.
We are all done.
No, I'm learning so much. I just want to make sure I see quite a few questions that are coming in. And
All right, let's do this.
if
So
it's
when parents are
okay,
worried, yep,
I want
let's
to
get
give
through
you,
this.
yeah, let's give you a minute to look through those questions. And while Jennifer is looking through your questions, by the way, thank you all for submitting questions while you've been listening to such an incredible talk this evening. Thank you. I see that she has shared with us some wonderful online resources. And so go ahead and
Yep.
look through those. I want to take this time while Jennifer's looking at your questions to do a quick commercial about
All
our
right.
Professional Speakers Bureau. For those of you that don't know, the Parish School has a Professional Speakers Bureau, and as community outreach, I am honored to not only speak on behalf of our Speakers Bureau, but also coordinate a number of my incredible colleagues who also speak on behalf of our Professional Speakers Bureau. So what is our Speakers Bureau? Within our Speakers Bureau, we are committed to building awareness of the importance of early intervention, as well as best practices in educating children who have communication delays and learning differences. Our specialists volunteer their time, and we speak at school in-services, we speak at conferences, we speak at workshops, we speak at webinars, we speak at moms groups and parent groups, and then COVID-19 happened. So we don't speak at any of those things anymore, but I am excited to tell you that we have transitioned our Professional Speakers Bureau to a digital format. So for those of you who are on tonight and thinking, you know what, I'm part of a great bunco group, or I'm part of a professional organization that would love some in-service, or I'm part of a mom's group in my neighborhood, we can coordinate a Speakers Bureau evening or morning or coffee chat for you. And it will be a very live and interactive experience, just like we're having right now. Some of the topics that we include are recognizing red flags and understanding typical language development, developing social competence and resilience, sensory integration disorder, the influence of movement on development and learning, adventurous play and loose parts, what is play therapy, building interaction and communication through play, growing language within everyday activities, and a new topic that was presented last year at the Texas Speech and Hearing Association conference, Digital and Developmental, a balanced approach for the growing child. So if you are interested in incorporating our Speakers Bureau into one of your community, parent-led groups, or professional groups, please reach out to me, Amy Lerman, alerman@parishschool.org. And Jennifer, did you have enough time to look through those questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got from an anonymous attendee, they're asking about suggestions for encouraging and helping preschooler to use utensils instead of their hands. You know, it's a tricky one. So sometimes that might be related to a fine motor deficit. It might be related to, I just want to get this food in my mouth as quickly as I can. So what you could do is ask them to try to use their fork 3 bites, and then the rest of the time they might use their hands. You might try to do something like you stab it and they put it in their mouth. That might be a good one for kids that are learning to use their fork. And then of course you're going to incorporate all that play and fine motor utensil use outside of meal times too. And that can be things like using tongs to pick up, you know, they got big tongs now to pick up big balls, things like that, that can really help our kids to develop their hand skills. You want to make sure that the spoon or fork that you're providing is appropriate, that it's a soft, big handle, that it's appropriate for their mouth. I think those are all really, really good, important things, but that's part of learning, right? They're going to be doing that. Sometimes they might need a reminder or two if they're older. I think that's a good one. your child grazes and loves snacks and snack foods. Is this okay, or should I encourage meals? We're going to encourage meals. I mean, we love our snack foods, don't we? But we need to kind of redefine snack foods, don't we? We need to redefine what snack is. A snack is just a small meal. And so that's another opportunity to learn about food. So what kind of snacks could you provide spaced out regularly throughout the day so your child is not grazing, so they have a chance to develop hunger, so that they can eat a more regular diet? That's going to be a really important one to do. How do I handle when a 2 or 3 year old totally falls apart when I put food on their plate that they don't want? Oh, that's a good one. Sometimes it's just kind of ignoring the behavior for a little bit. You don't want them hurting themselves. And it's hard for parents. I can tell you, I don't want to see my grandson cry when he's arching over and doesn't want what's served him. But if you can ignore it for a few seconds, a minute, most likely they're going to pull themselves together. Now, there's times when they won't. I understand that. And so we need to calm their fears. We need to calm them down. So what we can do is talk about what can we do. You can move that food off your plate. And so maybe it's on a learning plate. Maybe it's just on the table next to them. Maybe it's on mom's plate. It's okay. Some therapists will say, you don't have to eat it. You don't have to eat it. I prefer to say, it's what's on the plate tonight, and they can decide whether or not they're going to eat it. So we're not getting that in their head that they don't have to eat it. I think that's an important one. I think, what can you do with the food? If I can't handle it right now, you can cover it up. You can move it away. You can say, I don't want that right now. Help them to come up with what they can do. Okay, what if I serve a food that my child usually likes but does not want to eat at a particular meal? Should I let them go to bed hungry or choose a different food? Ideally, you're not choosing a new food. You're helping them develop their hunger cues and what they're hungry for at that time, and we're respecting that. That's part of the learning, is helping them to understand that about themselves. They're not going to go to bed hungry because you may offer a snack before bedtime. Now you got to be careful, especially about snacks before bedtime. But you want that snack to be nutritious. You may even want to provide that meal that they didn't eat as a snack, especially if you know it's something that they generally prefer. It might be in a little bit smaller portion size. It might be presented as a snack instead of the meal, but that is okay. And you're not letting them go hungry. You're not letting them go hungry, because guess what? In the morning, they're going to wake up and they're going to be hungry for breakfast if they decided not to eat that last snack of the day, if you choose to provide it, or the meal. So that's a really important thing. What are your thoughts about foods causing sensory issues such as repetitive behaviors? I think it depends on the additives. I think there is some limited research on that. I think it's worth documenting and trying to understand, but it's not an easy cut and dry issue. There's some limited research on that. Okay, should I hide healthy foods recipes I know my child would eat, like putting broccoli in muffins or something like that? You know what? I honestly think I know is it Jessica Feldman that does that. Ideally, you want to cook with your child. You want to talk about what's in the food, so that they begin to enjoy that. A lot of children will be put off by this. They'll lose your trust, and we don't want to lose your trust. Do you have recipes or sources that you recommend to do so? I don't have any recipes or sources. I mean, there's tons of resources out there on different foods that preschoolers will eat. Okay, what about kids who eat a variety of foods but get full quickly and seem to eat too little? Do they need more frequent meals? I'm sorry, wait a second. What about kids who eat a variety of foods but get full quickly and seem to eat too little? Do they just need more frequent meals? I think it's really dependent on the kid. Again, how a kid is made is very independent on who they are. I think it might be worth something to check into regarding, is this an issue, a medical issue? Is this just who they are? kids 2 to 6 should generally be able to make it for 2.5 to 3 hours. And I really think oftentimes what we see is just kids that are not, those meal times are not spread out far enough. They're not going to get lightheaded. They're not going to pass out for lack of food. I think you can't really make it any closer to that unless there's a medical reason to do so. Tips for getting your child to eat a school lunch or open items on their own without teacher help. Of course, you're going to provide lunches that are easily accessible. And you can practice at home. Practice this at home. Practice, you do a dinner or lunch where everybody's eating from a lunchbox if you're preparing to go to school. That's a great one. Practice getting your lunches from a bin and sitting on the table and unzipping, everybody taking their things out. And you're gonna learn real quickly what your kid can open and what they cannot open. So foods that are harder to open, you have the option of doing something that's easier. And then it's also working on that skill of getting tops open and, you know, working on the proprioception of operating containers and force. So that's the last one. Did I answer them all?
You sure did. Wow. And we,
It's a lot. It's a lot.
906.
It's a lot.
We did good.
It's a lot.
No, it was, you know what? I love what you had to say for families, especially making it work for the values and the practices of the family. That there is so important. I loved hearing about your own family and the differences in your own children. That's so relatable and helpful. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Jennifer, we really want to thank you, and good night.
Good night. Thanks, you guys.